Hello, my friend. Well, I think I've spoken about this subject before, and maybe it was on my other channel. I named it something like Live to be 300 years old or something. But the subject is time dilation. And this is one of the elements of rewilding and mindfulness that I get most excited about. The basic concept here is that we can consciously alter our perception of time so that we can, well, in essence, subjectively, live a lot longer than we would even by living to be 80, 90, 100, 110 years old. And we do this by some changes here. Now, it's well known that the human perception of time is very subjective. If you went to public school and you were at all like me, you probably remember staring at the clock and just waiting for it to get to recess time or to the end of the school day, and how very, very slowly that time would move. You probably also remember, the little mini vacations or snow day or things when time often slipped by much too quickly, and then it was back to school the next day. Alternately, if you've lived a little bit longer of a life, you may remember as a youth, this is a very well-documented fact of human nature, that in our youth, time goes very, very slowly. A year seems to take ages, and there's so much that happens in that year. By the time we are 70 or 80 or 90, most people are reporting that the years just kind of fly by. Oh my gosh, it seems like it was just yesterday, but that was 3 years ago. And so there is this idea that we humans, as we get older, time seems to subjectively speed up. The reasoning for this that's usually put forth is that we humans, being fairly long-lived, when we are young, a year, let's say if we're 6 years old, a year is a lot of time compared to the 6 years that we've lived. When we're 80, that year is a very small amount of time, and thus we experience it differently and shorter via that weighing, that contrasting. But I'm going to suggest that something completely different is at work. And I feel like I can say this with some amount of authority. And the reason is that I have seen it happen in many of our forest monks, and I've experienced it happening in myself, in my own family, with Rebecca, all being on the same path and finding that we have developed an ability to really alter our perception of time. Now, it happened with the forest monks because fairly universally, once you go out and you're in a living in the wild situation, when we do not have our watches, our clocks that chop the world up anymore into these bits of time, our time perception shifts, and it shifts in the direction of going more slowly. So I would hear from the majority of forest monks that after a certain amount of time in the woods, a month, 2 months, 3 months, that their perception of time would shift so much that even a day could be feeling almost like a week's time, maybe 7 times as long as it felt formerly when they were back in civilization. Then when people have gone back into civilization, they've often written to tell me, among many other things, that their experience of time slowly began to shift back, so that a day kind of blew by and it didn't feel like much was happening. Now, the reason for this, I believe, is that when we get out into nature, when we do not have these artificial chopped up bits of time coming into our perception all of the time, we get to experience the world in a different way, in a more immersive way. If I sit out here in the woods for an hour and I don't do anything, there's a lot that's going to happen. I'm going to have a lot of sensory experiences because I'm not trying to get to any place, and I don't have a certain amount of, well, I said for an hour here, but but you imagine you're just staying out for a certain amount of duration. And because I don't have a place to be and a time to be there, I soak into the experience that I'm in. I will feel the wind on my skin. I'll hear things. I might have some animal encounters with a chipmunk or a fox, a bird. I might hear that tree over there that's creaking in the wind and wonder, do trees feel something when they rub up against each other? I soak into this experience, and that hour becomes a very long time filled with experience, with life. I can go back, get onto the internet, start looking around, stuff popping into my head. It seems like I'm getting a lot of experience, but it's not immersive experience. It's very superficial. And I can spend an hour on the internet and it can be gone almost instantly. An hour out here can seem like many hours. An hour in the computer, on the computer, can seem like 15 minutes, especially in comparison. So in our own rewilding journey, Rebecca and I, our family, and in our mindfulness journey, which I really think are very much the same thing, these elements have become very, very important, because when we are immersed in our lives, pretty universally, we will think about something that happened, let's say last week, and it feels like it happened 3 months ago. Wow. We will talk about something that happened yesterday, and it will feel like it was maybe last week. We will go out for an adventure in the forest, and it will seem like many, many hours passed, and we'll get home and say, oh my gosh, it's only such and such a time? How is this? And notice this is happening even with us currently living with those clocks and those watches that chop up our time. So it's not just being independent of those timekeepers. It is our mental attitude, our mindset, and how immersed we are in each moment of life. The reason this is so vital, my friends, is, in my mind, kind of twofold. First of all, that immersion in life is what makes life so beautiful. When I really taste my food, when I really look into the eyes of someone that I'm speaking with, when I really smell that scent of the first hints of spring coming to the forest. Oh, life is amazing. When I get wrapped up into thought forms, oh, this, worries, that, then all that richness of life is gone. So by saying, I want to practice dilating time, that's going to require me to come into this mindfulness, and I get the twin benefits of immersing myself in life and thus enjoying it more. Even, I'd like to say, the quote, bad things. And at the same time, I get to extend out my life experience so that the next year can feel like, wow, I lived 3 or 4 years of life in that time. The other important thing that it gives us is that, well, look at how much of our life is concerned with survival. In other words, with making sure that we are going to be alive next year, and the year after that, and the year after that, and the year after that. In fact, our culture celebrates a long, extended lifespan. If somebody dies at 35, we say that's tragic. If they die at 95, we say, oh, they've lived a good, long life. Now, it could be that that person could have achieved 95 years, but have felt like it just buzzed by because they were so busy doing their whole life. And that person who lived to be 35 could have been very immersed in life and could have effectively lived a couple of centuries of life experience. And so by having our cultural standard define our ideas of what it means to be alive, we can get obsessed with just extending the numbers that we reach, trying to get to a higher number instead of trying to get a higher quality. So in other words, we are shooting for quantity of life rather than quality of life. Very different. Now notice that they do not have to be two separate things. We can easily live to be 95 and enjoy that full, deep experience of every year and moment of those 95 years. But if our goal is just to get to 95, then we can often forget to be here, to be immersed in this. So as I start to give up that goal of becoming 95, something special happens. And I start to lose a lot of that need to get to the next milestone. In other words, I begin to lose some of my fear of death. That fear of death, of wanting to go on and on, that desire to go on and on, is not actually maybe as positive a thing as we've been led to believe. We think, oh, the survival instinct, that is the most important thing. But we all are going to die in the end. So if you can get to 102 and feel like that was just junk, that whole thing sucked, is that as great as getting to 45 and saying, wow, I have lived 14 lifetimes, it feels like. If I make one more year, awesome. I don't need it, but if I get another year, it's going to be glorious and amazing. So, like so many things in life, it's that shift of attitude that creates a shift in perspective. And then the very reality that we experience starts to change. By reality, I mean our experience of life, that sensation of living that we have, changes. That is why dilation of time gets me so excited, because the quest for starting to be able to dilate time, to gain that skill set, leads you down this path that has so many other treasures along the way. To do it, all we have to do to dilate time is to immerse ourselves in the present moment. And to do that, we have to be aware of our senses and what they're experiencing. So if I stand here and I'm in my senses, I'm feeling the sun, I'm hearing my voice, hearing my friend over here in the woods, I am seeing these sights, the snow, the trees, the buds on the trees, the blue sky. This is an incredibly rich, deep, immersive experience. The opposite of being in my senses is just paying attention to my mind form, to my thought. If I'm thinking, what do I say next? How long has this video gone? Gosh, my feet are getting kind of cold. Then all that richness is gone in favor of these very kind of dry thought forms that I'm thinking. So if you want to practice time dilation, practice being immersed in your senses. Be immersed in your senses, and when you can pull this off for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, I think you're going to find that that space of 3 hours felt incredibly long, rich, and deep. I'm going to throw in one little bonus thought here that comes with the territory. And that is that when we hear about these things, we can think, oh, okay, senses, that's the real thing, the important thing. And my thoughts, those are the fake thing, the thing I should discard. But that's not completely true. Remember when I was talking about being out here and wondering if those trees, when they're rubbing, if they have any sensation. When our thoughts start to interweave with the sensations that we're experiencing, they add to the richness. They can add an amazing richness. Our imagination, our questioning mind, and our exploratory mind, curiosity, which gets us to look deeper into that immersive experience we're having. So let's not make the mistake of thinking, here's the good part of the mind sensing, here's the bad part, which is the thinking mind. Instead, to see that these two are woven together beautifully. It's just when that thinking mind becomes the dominant force And it's taking, really pirating all of our attention, slipping it away, that we start to really miss out on life. All right, my friends, huge love to all of you. And please share in the comments any thoughts you have about this. Have you experienced dilation of time? Even just share your subjective experiences of time. A moment in your life when things stretched out, time stretched out and was very long. And a moment in your life that seemed to fly by. And then how has becoming even slightly more immersed in your sensory experience changed your perception of time and your perception of life? How does it feel when you're immersed in something? All right, can't wait to talk with you in the comments. And here's a cool thing that probably you've noticed before, but it's just a neat thing about nature. So look at the blue sky on the horizon. The shade of blue that it is. Now I'm going to pan upwards. Look what happens. It gets so dark blue. And that's one of those miraculous things about our world that some of us have never noticed. Really evident today.